Hi, everyone. My name is Ben Demers, and welcome to this evening's meeting of the Gilman Square City Redevelopment Parcels Civic Advisory Committee, or CAC. I'm going to share my screen quickly before we get started. Okay, and can everyone see this?
Yes.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay. So as I mentioned, my name is Ben Demers. I'm an economic development planner with the city. I'll pass things also to my colleague, Rachel Nadkarni.
Hi, everyone. My name is Rachel Nadkarni. I'm the Director of Economic Development.
And so just to go over the agenda quickly for this evening's meeting before we get into things. So we'll start with a roll call. And it says here approval of previous meeting summaries. I apologize, I did not get this out in time for everyone to have a chance to review. So we're going to skip over that portion, but we'll be able to review the previous meeting summaries at the next CAC meeting. We'll then have time for a public comment period. I'm also now realizing I did not update this agenda slide. So really quickly, I'm going to talk through what the actual points will be. So we're going to give an update about the home insight and temporary programming process. And then the fourth item is going to be an update about the community path detour. And then we'll shift to also have a time for CAC members to share anything that they have been hearing in the community about the city-owned parcels within Gilman Square. And then we'll have a quick update from city staff about an upcoming presentation to the city council on the implementation of the Gilman Square station area plan. And then we will have additional time for public comment, and then we'll adjourn the meeting. I do also want to make a note before we hop into things that this is the first meeting that we are doing with the Gilman Square CAC on Zoom. So please note that the chat function on this meeting is disabled. The reason that we do that is because in order to comply with open meeting law, the direction from the state says that you cannot use the chat function because it counts as what is called side conversation, which is not allowed in any meeting that needs to comply with open meeting law. So if you do want to make a comment here this evening, please raise your hand. And when I see that raised hand in the participants tab, I will call on you. And I'll then be able to unmute you to speak. So I apologize if that's different than, I know it's a little bit different than how people use Zoom in other settings sometimes, just want to call that out. Before we shift into the substantive agenda items, are there any questions from any CAC members about this shift or from members of the public? Okay, looking like none. So I'm going to first shift into the roll call. So I will read through CAC members' names, and please just let me know if you are here. I cannot see everyone's camera very well, so please just say audibly if you are here or not. Diana?
Here, I'm here.
Thank you. Melinda?
Here.
Okay. Ram? I can see Ram. I didn't hear it, but I can see Ram. Casey?
Sorry, here.
Thank you.
I'm here. This is Casey.
Jack? And let me make sure that Jack is not joined as an attendee, because I know he said he should be able to make it. Okay. I don't see him on at the moment. Lisa? Okay. Jamie?
Here.
Jennifer is not going to be able to make it this evening. Nor is Brittany. Michelle? I believe we saw Michelle on. Yep, okay, I can see her waving her hand. Ben? I do also see Ben on. He might just be having some trouble unmuting. Councillor Klingon?
Present.
It's Ben. Am I coming through now?
Yes, you are.
Okay, I was double muted.
All good. And then Councillor Ewan Campen? I do not see on. Okay. Okay. So then I want to shift into the first agenda item, which is the first public comment period. So we have these both at the beginning and the end of the CAC meeting this evening. The first public comment period, we generally try to keep to about 10 minutes, and then we leave more open-ended time at the end for anyone who might have a longer comment. So I do want to leave the space if any members of the public who are with us this evening want to make a comment, please just use the raise your hand function, and then I'll be able to call on you to unmute. And I'm just going to give like 20 seconds. Okay. I am not seeing any hands raised at this time. If you do end up having a question or a comment that comes up during the discussion this evening, like I said, we're going to have a public comment period also at the end of the session, so please feel welcome to raise your hand then. Want to make sure anybody who wants to make a comment or ask a question tonight is able to do so. Okay, and with that, we're going to shift into the next item on the agenda, which is an update regarding the home insight and the temporary programming process. So with that, I'm going to shift things over to Rachel.
So good evening, everyone. I want to give you an update on where we are with thinking about this site and getting going with our redevelopment process as it relates to the Winter Hill Community School. When we met over the summer, we said, you know, we were pencils down at the moment while we awaited the Winter Hill School process and figuring out what's going on, and how the site, if the site is important or necessary to getting the Winter Hill School back on track in its original site. So the folks who have really been necessary for that conversation finally, you know, are in a place where they can start to dive into it. We moved the whole school. It was actually quite a success for anyone who is in the parent community. We've been hearing generally positive results out of the start of the school year. Not a circumstance anyone wishes they were in, but the Edgerly is working pretty well. So where we are at this stage, we've been in communication with capital projects team. We are starting to have these conversations, but we definitely have a little ways to go still. So they've looked at the site at the Winter Hill. We've looked at the site, the Holman site, as a if we needed to, you know, put a new school at that location, would it work? It's definitely too small for that. That we have been able to figure out. The next question though is, okay, if the school is going to be, you know, in thinking about what the next iteration of the Winter Hill School is, the site still might be helpful in facilitating a faster turnaround. Whether that might be for construction, whether that could be for temporary uses, we don't know the answer on that yet, and we still don't know when we will know the answer. So we are at a status quo, and I know that is frustrating for many, but we are still in status quo on figuring out the timeline that Winter Hill School and this site might intersect. Hoping to get, you know, more answers on that soon, but I do have to say we don't have a definitive, we will know by X date at this point. I don't remember if there's anything else. Ben, did I miss anything?
No, I think that that's everything. Before we shift into discussing, because we do also want to give an update about temporary programming, do we want to first have discussion, hear any initial reactions to that update from Rachel?
Any thoughts, questions, concerns?
Are there any other sites that are being considered for the school?
You know, I don't know where things are. I know there's lots of moving pieces. We're still figuring out what like there's still a lot going on in terms of figuring out the renovation possibilities at the school. And that's why we're sort of on pause. But we did ask the question of, hey, would it make sense to consider the site as a whole scale shift down the block? That has been ruled out just because it is too small.
And they're not considering fixing the site, fixing the building. Is that
That is
out?
very much still in the Winter Hill School in its current location being fixed up is very much still in play.
Okay.
And that's where our site at the Holman site might be valuable. We're not very far away. The Winter Hill School has a beautiful play yard. And what we don't want to see, what we want to sort of offer up is, hey, can we keep the play yard open? Does leaving the Holmans vacant for a little bit and enable the play yard to stay open? Does it enable faster turnaround because you can store materials there? Does it mean that you can put the construction trailer or temporary something? I don't know what like a school might need on a temporary basis, but if it would facilitate things, we want to make sure that we're meeting that need because the school is so important in the neighborhood.
I see also Ben Elgart's hand is up.
Yeah. I think the lack of certainty about its involvement is a bit disconcerting. I don't think it has to be, but right now we have no timelines for anything. And this is yet another thing that is not helping us allow the community to understand benchmarks that will so that they can follow along with the progress of the site. Like it would be great if I think a lot of people are confused about how this process is unfolding, and so I think when there are delays to even beginning the process more fully, or having benchmarks to, again, milestones that we are going to hit in assessing the Holman site and what's going to happen there. I think without that, like this is very alarming. If we had benchmarks and we knew this wasn't going to delay them, then I think that would be less alarming. And I think that kind of echoes what I've been hearing in the community.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Sorry, I just want to follow up. Would this delay the use of the ARPA funds for activating the site?
We're going to turn to that in a second because there's more detail there to dive into. Is it worth, should we turn to that now? Are there any other questions, just before we do, are there any other questions on sort of the longer term or comments there before we turn to the temporary and the short term period?
No,
Ben,
I'm
do you
not seeing
want to
any.
turn to that and explain, and we can tie in, Ben, your question? Ben Elgert, I should say, sorry.
Yeah, sounds good. So just to give some context to this, I know back when the city presented to the community in February and also met with the CAC in February, we had talked about the potential for using ARPA funding to host some sort of temporary programming on different sites within Gilman Square. So we had talked about the Homans lot at 350 Medford Street. We had also talked about the Triangle Park at the intersection of Pearl and Medford, and then also possibly the Medford Street Bridge. So hosting some sort of temporary programming there, and especially as the Homans site, like with an eye to long-term development on the site eventually, having something in the interim so that it's not just an empty lot in the meantime. So when we gave the update back in July, we have been working with our procurement team since then. This has taken longer than we had anticipated or had hoped for. Like this procurement has had a lot that they've had to work through to get these ARPA funds moving. We should be able to put out an RFP very soon for temporary programming. So it would be here at those sites in Gilman Square. It would also be at 90 Washington Street and at other locations in the city, which would be determined essentially by whoever responds and receives that RFP with the city. And as I mentioned in Gilman, this could include the Triangle Park, it include the bridge, it could include the Homan site. However, when we spoke in July, we had also talked about the fact that the Homan site is not currently paved, which makes doing a lot of temporary programming on the site very difficult because it's not an accessible site. So this isn't ruling out that the Homan site could have some sort of temporary use on it, but it's looking like it would be more, because it cannot be paved, it would be more like an installation rather than something that people would be able to go onto the site directly to interact with, because that is an accessibility issue. Yeah, so that is sort of the main update that we have at this time around temporary programming. We're still hoping to be able to do something exciting in Gilman Square and make use of those other lots that we had also discussed. But because of the difficulty around paving, are not able to put sort of a more interactive use directly on that site.
So Ben Elgart, to your question about how Hill School might intersect with this, the ARPA timeline is very short. The ARPA timeline only allows us to spend funds up until June of 2024. And that's part of the this intersection of being able to pay, not being able to pave means not being able to do some like programming on the site, because to pave, the timeline of getting funding, just the wave of applications through ARPA and RFPs and things like that has been so bottlenecked that we haven't been able to move on getting paving and drainage and all of that done. Meaning that we have to sort of look at what we can actually accomplish by June 24. I would not expect, just thinking about how this ties in with the Winter Hill timeline of when they would start construction, I would not expect that they would want the site until June of 24. That could change, but realistically, I think we are probably still going to be able to move ahead on the temporary pieces.
I guess, are there any initial reactions? I have some other pieces I want to talk about, but are there any initial reactions to that part of the temporary programming conversation? I see a couple of hands up. Diana?
Yeah, I was just wondering about the paving restriction for accessibility. I mean, are there other ways that you can prepare the site that would be considered accessible without having to pave it? Like these kind of like interlocking plastic kind of mats that they do sometimes on top of grass, like to make like a dance floor or something like that. It seems kind of silly that the site would be paved and obviously expensive and not great for runoff and stormwater and all that. So I'm just wondering if there's other, or can you build kind of like a stage and have a ramp and there'd be like a big, really low stage that people could have programming on?
Those things might be possible. I think where the hurdle we've really been stuck in is getting our team in place to be able to, we need somebody who has full bandwidth to devote to and the creativity to explore exactly the ideas that you're talking about. So we do expect that they will look at the site and its constraints, and maybe that is a possibility. Maybe if those kinds of things can be rented on it for an event, maybe that'll be an option. The other thing we've been sort of anticipating is maybe there's a way that they could do like an art installation that you engage with from the sidewalk, right? Like, are there opportunities that we could look at that deal with the site in its current conditions? So what we've really figured out is that ARPA timeline is so content and condensed that changing site condition at this point really doesn't seem possible.
And do we have the ARPA funding, or are we still waiting for it to be allocated and then it expires by June?
The funding exists, but what we've been the best way I've heard it described is basically we had we're absorbing a wave, right? You have this massive amount of funding coming into the city, and our the project staff, us included, the folks who deal with project work, we have the capacity to work on these things to a certain extent, and we're absorbing that wave alongside all of our other priorities. Then we've got our administrative teams, our procurement colleagues and our auditing colleagues. Their teams are absorbing this wave for all $77 million and all of the paperwork that has to go into processing that. We do have a specialized ARPA team that's dealing with the federal reporting standards, but they are dealing with the federal side of it. The internal piece of it, that has to fit through our standard team that exists. And so we've got this wave that's crashing on us. And the prioritization was such that money that was going to our nonprofit community went out first. Money that's being dealt with for internal projects has been, we were sort of after that. And so it's being absorbed. We're in the queue, but we're sort of waiting for this wave to bring us along. And it's frustrating for everyone, ourselves included. And certainly for the folks who are in the middle of it, trying to process $77 million worth of paperwork in addition to all that are normal.
I guess I would wish if there was some other funding source that the city could temporarily provide and then reimburse itself with ARPA funds or something like that. I mean,
yeah,
like a few food trucks and making like a platform, it doesn't seem like it would need all that much money, and I'm sure people have thought that.
Yeah, it's one of those things. Federal funding is a blessing and a curse, because it's wonderful to be able to advance on these initiatives, but it does mean it's just a lot to absorb.
I see Ben's hand is up again.
Yeah. I wanted to say that I'm encouraged that that we are not pitted against the school. That's wonderful that these timelines may align. It's also encouraging that thank you for saying how you're open-minded to ways that we could activate the Home Insight with whether it's rolling in a food truck or art installation. I think those are all viable things. I think the one thing I'd want to just remind or bring into the conversation is like, this is a means to an end. We want to learn things so we eventually can get to that RFP and actually build on the Home Insight. I think if the ARPA funds go and activate less, it's still learning that we can bring into that process. So I'd much rather see something get stood up that might not be all the bells and whistles that we want it to be in Gilman Square, but that can still bring something more learning into our process. A lot of it's validation. So we already have a lot of learning. We just need to validate, right? That's why we're doing it. So I think there's still a great opportunity here, and I'm excited to see it move forward. And
yeah, I do still think we're going to get a great season out of this. I know it's been frustrating, and what it might do is condense our planning timeline, but I do really hope that we're going to get a great season for spring, summer, to get some great programming out there.
Sorry, I'm just furiously typing in the background. Any other thoughts or comments on this piece? I have another note about temporary programming before we shift to another item. Okay, I'm not seeing any other hands. So the other note that I wanted to make on temporary programming is that as we had discussed last February at the community meeting, the city's Department of Public Works might utilize a portion of this site for snow storage for the 2023 to 2024 season. So they're currently investigating this potential. I do want to stress as I say this, because I know snow storage is not everyone's favorite use on the site, and especially as we're talking about not being able to potentially do some of the temporary programming that we had hoped for. I do just want to stress that snow storage is extremely difficult in Somerville. It is a very dense city. There is not a lot of space to put snow. I have heard so many presentations from the commissioner of the Department of Public Works at this point about this very topic. And it's a very critical function because without it, the city cannot function during a snow emergency, during a snowstorm. So there is the potential that some snow is going to be stored at the Homan site. 90 Washington has been secured. So 90 Washington is a site in East Somerville. And the Department of Public Works for the city has an MOU, has an agreement with the Somerville Redevelopment Authority, which owns 90 Washington, in order to store snow on that site for this upcoming season. So there is that location, and DPW is also looking into other potential sites nearby. So it is not definite that snow will be stored here, and there are other options being looked into, but I do just want to bring up, as we had discussed last February, that there is the possibility of snow being stored at the Homan site. Just so that's not a surprise if snow begins to be stored there. Are there any initial comments to that mention? Ben, I don't know if your hand is still up from before, but I will call on you.
Sorry.
Is it? Okay.
I have no comment.
Okay.
Anyone else?
Obviously, this is also a good amount of information at once. So if we come back to this at the end, as we have public comment and CAC members have other thoughts on these items, we can also discuss them more then. I'm going to go back through and fill in these notes also so that we're able to send out a more full version later. But for now, I'll shift into the next item, which is an update about the community path and detour in Gilman Square. So as many people, I'm sure as everyone on this call knows, the city had installed a detour to the community path extension while the high school was continuing work on the fields, since the high school construction crew was placing equipment along the extension between School Street and Medford Street. That detour went north on School Street to the intersection with School and Medford, and then it went east along Medford Street to the community path. So that was obviously the divider that had the sort of like white bike lane dividers that had been up for the past several months. And as people who have walked around the neighborhood have also probably seen, the Medford Street portion of the detour was removed last week. So traffic on Medford has returned to two-way. The city is planning to keep the School Street portion of that detour in place indefinitely. It's getting a lot of use. Eventually, the city also plans to install an extension of the detour from its current location to the intersection of School and Highland. So essentially just kind of continuing the extension up School Street up to the top of the hill at that intersection of School and Highland as part of the bicycle network plan implementation. There isn't a short-term implementation plan for that yet, but that is something that we've heard a lot from the community about the desire for that extension. So it's something the city and the mobility team specifically continues to look at. Are there any questions or comments sort of about how that detour has changed in the last few weeks? Thoughts on this? I still am not sure if this is Ben's hand from before, so I am going to call on you again, Ben.
No comment. I am using the app. It seems like the app is having problems.
All good.
The Ron's hand also. I think Ron, you're up.
Okay. Is that going to be two-way up to Highland when they extend the detour to Highland Street?
I actually don't have a definitive answer on that. I would assume yes.
Because it is a two-way right now, right?
Yeah, because it's two-way on the portion of School Street, so I would assume it's an extension of what is there now all the way up, but I don't know what that implementation will actually look like. but I would assume the two-way portion of it, yes. There are probably also details of that. I'm not sure if you have had a chance to read the city's bicycle network plan, but there are probably details about whether that would be two or one way in that plan. Also, Rachel, please let me know if I'm missing any hands because I did not see ROMs when it was up.
I don't see anyone else.
Okay.
I don't know if you're gonna mention this later on, but I know today they opened up that soccer field behind City Hall, which is really, really awesome. I went to the ribbon cutting for that, so it's a beautiful new soccer field and open space that's more than an acre right behind City Hall. It's really great. So, see that.
There definitely has been scheming around the plantings at the edge of the fields and the fact that the sidewalk's going to open next to City Hall finally. So it's exciting to see all that progress, and it is a huge new green space for the neighborhood. So yeah, Diana, thank you for remembering that. I didn't quite put the name and the place together when I saw the listing on the open ribbon cutting, because this is the third ribbon cutting of the week.
Yeah, and then Mr. Rivas, I think his name was there, and he's amazing. The Somerville High School alumni from 1954. The field is named after.
Nice, yeah. Thank you for mentioning that. And yeah, if anybody hasn't had a chance to go check that out, it is a huge green space right in the middle of the neighborhood. Any other comments about the community path, or I think to that point of Deanna mentioning the field opening, anything else that we can kind of shift into the next agenda item, which is updates from CAC members. So just wanted to have a space where C members can talk about anything that you're hearing from the community regarding the city-owned parcel. So regarding the Homan site, the Triangle Park, but also other things such as the soccer fields or the bridge, anything that might be coming up that you feel like this would be a good forum to discuss it in. Dana, I saw your hand go up first.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to mention also that the YMCA, which is on Highland, I know there was talk in the past of them looking at this site as one of their possible locations to expand or relocate to, but now it sounds like they're trying to expand in place, and there's some kind of application with the Historic Preservation Commission to either demolish the whole building, or I didn't quite understand what the conclusion was, but it sounds like maybe they're going to find a way to preserve part of the building, but they're going to be allowed to demolish part of it so they can build a larger facility there on Highland Avenue. So we're not going to have that large use eventually coming down to Gilman Square, but it sounds like it would probably happen faster on their current location than Gilman Square, given all the delays with Gilman. So I thought that was a really positive turnout, that it will continue to be right there in this kind of center of the city location.
I see Rom has a thought too.
Does anybody know there's going to be a city hall meeting, some kind of city meeting about the historic commission for the YMCA building? Does anybody know the date of that?
I can look that up while we're speaking. But yeah, so just in terms of a little bit about that application, what they have to do is they put in an application to have the building reviewed. That'll set the clock on the demolition delay, and then they will have a more in-depth conversation. There will be an in-depth conversation around, to your point, at those meetings around as they progress in the design, what level of demolition is really being discussed. So there are many details still to come, but I will look up those dates right now.
I would be really sad to see that go, to be honest.
But they have to put that in, they have to put those applications in, even if all they do is demo the roof. So like there isn't I don't think there's a decision yet at all about how much demo is in play.
Ben, I'm just going to check if, I know I've asked every time, but I just want to make sure if your hand is up to make a comment or not.
It is this time.
Okay.
Thanks. I have to have a look. Yeah, so I did share with members of the Gilman Square Neighborhood Council about the meeting, and some of the feedback that I got in general was just an eagerness for the site to be developed soon. And among that was for a couple of reasons. At least one person said that they're having a hard time accessing the MBTA platform from downhill, and they look forward to stairs or escalators, something to help them get there. They were also concerned about changes to MBTA bus plan, the 80 bus, and access to supermarkets. I know the bus changes, I think, are being delayed, but they also expressed an interest in more affordable food options being nearby. So that was at least one of the comments that I heard. I think outside of that, there is other conversation from people in the neighborhood, just not sure of kind of the benchmarks that we're marching towards. So I think maybe a bit of clarity. I think a lot of the more recent updates we've heard haven't really been about either the parcels themselves. There's been about things that relate to the square, obviously important stuff, but I think there's some questions about what specific next steps are there around the parcels in particular, with the hopes that with the city reading out its plans, it might drive more energy in general with other people, you know, who might be looking to rent near Gilman Square, or you know, some of the other private sites nearby. So I think there's been interest in hearing, you know, again, more of a clear roadmap for this next steps for the parcels.
Yeah, thank you, Ben. And thank you for sending, I saw you send that message out to the GSNC listserv, so thank you for that. Rachel, I also see your hand now.
Yes, let's see that. I was giving it a try. Ben, Ben Algert, one of the pieces I just wanted to respond to in those comments I think is really helpful for all of us to keep in mind is coordinating with the MBTA on that connection. Oh, and hi, Jack. Thanks for joining. We are making progress in the relationship building with the MBTA. And we are continuing to search for grant opportunities to support that connection to the station. One of the things that we are watching very carefully is the state of the market and what that might mean in terms of the costs, like how much we can rely on development to cover the cost of a big infrastructure piece like the connection to the station. It's looking, you know, as everyone who's probably seeing the news goes, right? Interest rates keep going up, construction costs keep going up. We're tracking that, and we are also tracking the cost of other connections to the Green Line stations and other places in the city. So as part of that, that's helping us build the relationship and really understand what the MBTA is going to be looking for when we come to this site and look to build a connection. We are looking at pedestrian bridges and connections to the stations in East Somerville, and also in Boynton Yards. And in each of those conversations, we are including Gilman Square as well to say, hey, what is it like? What are those criteria that the MBTA is looking for when we do make connections to the stations? What are the challenges that they see? What height do you need to be above the overhead catenary line? We're learning all of that information through these 3 projects, and just the nature of the other 2 is that they are a little further along in the conversations and in the design process. They are a bit different because in terms of the actual proposal, they're talking about pedestrian bridges that go from one side to the other as opposed to connecting into the station more directly. But it is giving us the right relationship building opportunity to keep that moving forward. So it's a background item, but it is an important one. So Ben, I just wanted to hit on that we are making progress inch by inch in getting that lined up.
I see Councillor Klingen's hand up.
Yeah, thank you. Just along those lines, maybe I was missing, maybe Rachel, this is partly what you were talking about, but as far as the MBTA, as far as funding goes, couldn't a developer that we work with at some point go for a MassWorks grant, like similar to the one in Boynton Yards?
100%. We would expect that would be part of this process. We submitted a MassWorks grant for a pedestrian bridge between looking at the East Somerville station. We're very close to decisions. I don't know where we are in the process there, but what the ask was for funding to progress that bridge design. Part of that is landing on all of these details about ownership of the infrastructure, the height above the catenaries, the requirements for ramps and elevators and escalators, and all these kinds of important criteria that we need to use to build all of these bridges. We've learned some of that already from Gilman Square, right? From Union Square with the elevator that was built at US2. So luckily, what's great is that our mobility team is very deeply connected with the MBTA team, and we're able to progress these conversations day by day to learn what we need to learn to figure out what criteria we need to save in the site when we have the private development conversation.
Okay, thanks.
And yes, for sure, I think grant funding is going to be part of this.
Are there any other updates or responses to what was just discussed that people want to share?
I do have an answer, a half answer, Ron, on the question of the the YMCA date. It looks like they had a conversation Tuesday, October 17th, so that was last week. At the Historic Preservation Commission, I did reach out to the planner to see if that was continued, but their next meeting will be on Tuesday, November 7th. So I looked to the agenda as that comes out, but also just if you are interested in tuning in on the YMCA conversation, if there wasn't a decision already, the next meeting is the 7th of November.
Thank you.
I see Jamie's hand also up.
Yes, sorry.
All good.
I was just gonna say, from the, I don't know, the perspective of the people that I spend most time around, which is people like coming into the area for work, it's just a lot of people, and everyone that thinks that, or knows I am involved in some way. It's just like every day it's like, when is something going in there? When are there going to be like businesses that, we can utilize during the day that just kind of have, are a place you would like to hang out, a place you'd like to be. what is happening with this empty space. Just sort of a lot of, just kind of always questions and a desire for, I think like things that are kind of, utilitarian and enjoyable.
Sorry, typing. Thank you for sharing that though. That's helpful to hear.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Are there any other comments before we shift into the next agenda item? Okay. So this last piece is really more of a quick announcement from the city side. So the city council has requested that the economic development division, which both Rachel and I are in, will be presenting an update to the city council to give a status of the Gilman Square Station area plan. So if you have not seen this plan before, this plan was released by the city in 2014. And a big portion of it is the city-owned parcels within Gilman Square, and also the assumption of where the Gilman Square station would be situated in the square. So if you were interested in hearing that presentation, once we received an exact date, I'm going to send an email to all CAC members. So this is really just to say this will be happening in the next couple months, and we'll give you an update. Councillor Klingon, is your hand still up from before, or is it a comment on this? Okay, it went down and then back up and then down. Okay. Sounds good. With that, I'm going to shift into the second public comment period for the meeting. So if any members of the public would like to make a comment, so I see one hand up. Okay, so David Todorakis, I'm going to unmute you now.
Hi, yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Cool. Yeah, so I have a few comments. I'll try to be brief. I'll echo what's been said about, as someone who lives in the area, my wife and I own property nearby, and yeah, we would very much be excited to see that lot be utilized. And specifically, I mean, it's right next to the green line. It would be an absolute shame to not build a significant amount of housing there, so much so that I think it wouldn't make any sense, right, to build something that didn't include a lot of housing. But in addition to that, living in Gilman Square, I think it's fair to say that Gilman Square is a square in name only, right? There's not really anything to do there. You get off the Green Line stop, and like if I didn't live there, I would never ever get off on the Green Line stop since I don't go to the high school, right? So basically, just what I'm saying is, having something there, restaurants, shops, would be absolutely fantastic. We currently have basically one restaurant, which is Sarma, and Sarma is wonderful, but I'm not going to eat there every night. So having to walk all the way to Union Square, take the community bike path down to Davis Square, having to go very far to basically do anything is a shame. So that would be wonderful. And I'll also echo that some kind of connection to the Green Line stop would be great. So yeah, mixed use housing and retail, please. Feel like building anything other than that would be kind of a shame. Also, sorry, last thing. There's that mobile gas station right next to it. Any chance you guys could buy that and absorb it into the project? Because there are currently 2 gas stations right across the street from each other. We don't need 2 gas stations there. If anything, it's kind of silly. So maybe absorb that into the project, make something bigger. That'd be great. All right, that's all I got. Thank you.
Rachel, do you want to respond to that last piece while I'm typing?
Sure, thanks, David. So on the mobile station, that has been one of the questions for a while, actually, with this site. I would say actually going back to 2014, has been this question of should this be a joint project? And we've been down this path for a while of saying trying to get to the place of debating, do we take look at taking the property by eminent domain or not? The hope was that we were going to be spending our time really diving into that question, and then the Winter Hill School happened, and we've been sort of hamstrung a little bit about even when can we move forward and how can we move forward. We have had a conversation with staff, have had a conversation with the owner of the mobile station just to let them know the stuck point that we are in right now. They are interested in redevelopment of their property, and have folks who are interested in purchasing their property. So where we landed at this point is we understand if they want to move forward with pursuing an application. Any property owner can proceed with applications for their project, for their sites, even if their eminent domain is in the conversation. That is the case in Union Square, where we have an urban renewal plan. It's also the case in Winter Hill, where we have an urban renewal plan. We don't have an urban renewal plan covering the site right now, which is what we would need to do to take the property. But that doesn't mean that that's one pathway forward to do it as a joint project. Another would be to, if the mobile site owner were to sell to somebody, or they themselves were interested in laying out a collaborative route, there might be a collaboration possible if the timing works out. We're just in a place where our timing is a little stuck, which is tricky. We do hope very soon we are going to get past this point and able to get back to that conversation. It's just we're a little stuck at the moment. Ben, did you want to add? Ben Elgart, it looks like you wanted to add something to that. And also feel free, this is a collaboration. So I would say, as members of the advisory committee, feel free to respond as well. It doesn't have to just be me. So I saw Ben Elgart first, and then Ron, was going to chime in as well.
I also see another member of the public that I'll get to after Ben and Ron make comment.
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, so I guess I have a follow-up question because the engagement the city's had with the mobile parcel owner is recent development. And one thing that I don't think we have reached clarity in conversations that we've had in the CAC is whether or not the goals of the of the conversations and the neighborhood's goals can be met without taking the property. So through private development, can others, build the vision that the neighborhood is eager for? And I was wondering how we determine that, whether there would be a specific document that would state that, or if it would be an analysis, because it sounds like that's an important way to signal to prospective developers that should they come up with something that really resonates with the neighborhood, that that it could be in line and therefore really. Those developers know that they could bring about this vision.
So what we have so far is the document that was produced by the CAC, that 2-pager that sort of summarized all the findings to go along with the sort of the 2014 plan, the zoning analysis, and then we have the findings from the CAC outreach process in 2022 that laid out, the use interests that we all were hearing from the neighbors. I think Benny, your question is a great one, which is for us to do a little thinking about as a staff to see what resources we can pull at this stage to and sort of think about the timing of it for if an analysis is going to be helpful to that. I think one of the big ones that we've been talking about was, to Diana's point, right, the YMCA or a large scale community center with pool and things like that was something that was really on the table a while ago, with the YMCA making their announcement that they are planning to stay in position. That does take that off the list. And that was one of the clearest uses that would require the full site, the site inclusive of the mobile station. The other things we've been talking about, retail, and open space and housing, maybe it is a different mix. David, you had a great question. I have to say that first. So Ron, I think, had his hand up next. My apologies for jumping in.
Yeah, it's kind of similar to Ben's question. Can we try to tell prospective developers that we'd prefer a site that prefer a project that include the other site? That's A, and B, is there some way of doing an urban renewal plan just as a backup in case we don't developers interested in working with that site? It's just, or is that too much? Is that too costly to do the urban renewal plan?
Processing here a little bit. I think it's not necessarily out of the question. To Ben Algart, you made this point before, and this is where we've been sort of in a tricky spot with the milestones and the steps going forward. And I know we've been stuck with Winter Hill School. There's the disposition study that was brought up in February as well. Thinking about how does the site relate to other city-owned properties how does the site relate to other city-owned properties in terms of disposing of it out to the public in the private development world. And then there's this question of, are we doing urban renewal or not? I think what we owe you all is a really robust conversation about what those timelines look like. It will take us a little bit to pull that together, though, I have to say, just as a capacity step, and also making sure that we are getting that timeline right. But these are great questions.
So isn't there also a way to potentially include the mobile site, not through urban renewal, but just offering it as a possible site, and then it's up to each developer to decide whether they want to try to negotiate with the mobile owner and include that parcel, or maybe each developer makes one plan that doesn't need it and one plan that does, and then they try to negotiate and work that out. And so then it doesn't require the city to do a big urban renewal plan effort.
Yeah, that's definitely another possibility, right? Especially given that the owner has been entertaining offers from the development community. There's a trigger point, right? One is if and this is this trickiness of the timing, right? Is not knowing when our timing looks like, because we've been in this stuck point. We could set our process up where the if you had site control already of the mobile station, you have a good chance of winning our bid. We could have our process set up where we say, you might want to talk to the neighbor and see if it works. You can work out a private deal. Or you might be able to say, you know what, we'll let them proceed on their time and we'll proceed on our timeline because their timelines aren't aligned. All are possible options. Doing the urban renewal plan does add to our timeline. It is, probably 6 to 9 months of process to get it written and take it through the take it through all the approvals that it needs, including up through the state.
And I think regardless of whether that gas station site was part of an urban renewal plan, I think most people would love to at least be able to include recommendations for what they'd like to see there in the long run, so that we don't have a gas station right next to the train station. We do encourage other development there that is more pedestrian friendly and that provides open space and is not car oriented.
Okay, I don't see any other hands up, but I want to give it 15 to 30 seconds just because there was a hand up earlier that was put down.
And David, thank you for that question.
Okay, I'm seeing John, I see your hand up. Let me unmute you.
Hello?
Hey, we can hear you.
Oh, you can hear me. Me and John, this is Augustino, and John is sitting right next to me. We are the owners of the property in the corner of Walnut Street in Medford. The bare land, it's got 15,000 square feet of land there. And it's about maybe 400 yards from Gilman Square. And, we've been listening and on all this stuff. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to rezone that area. We would love to have you guys on board. We're trying to rezone that area to 5 stories. The reason being is we saw, the guy called the restaurant, donut shop, whatever. That could be done. And right now it's zoned for an MR3, which we're going up against City Council, and they're going to be voting in November. And we've been walking around the neighborhood, giving out flyers to neighbors, talking to neighbors. And we got a lot of great feedback of going on 5 floors for not just affordable housing, also for the affordability in Somerville for young couples, ownership that they are able to buy something, because obviously you can't touch real estate in Somerville these days. And the place sounds good. I mean, they were saying that in the future they might go up floors near railroads and railroad stations and stuff like that. I mean, we are right in the heart of that, and it's that's the train station, is right there in Gilman Square. We're right near the library. We have an 11-unit building in front of us. We did a lot of solar studies on the building, and they're it doesn't affect anybody in the neighborhood. Our shade between 3 floors, which is by right, to 5 floors. And there's another reason is I can get developers more on board because of today's rates and everything, going 5 floors than 3 floors, which is lack of interest. So that's all I really have to say. I would love to see you guys on board on something like this, and I'd like to cooperate with you with this association, and hope we could get it done.
And meet with you guys.
That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Are there any other comments from members of the public or from CAC members? David, I see your hand still up. That might just be from before, but it.
Oh, yeah, I actually wanted to respond. I know this meeting is not about that other lot, But again, I also live very close to that one, and I'm aware of what they're trying to do. And since he mentioned it, yes, for God's sake, let them build it as high as they want to. Again, we have a ridiculous housing shortage. Like I said, there's very little retail nearby. Hey, why not mixed use, 5-story residential retail there as well? And the other thing I wanted to say is, because it's been floated, I think you guys were talking about, like maybe a community center or something in that the lot that is the subject of this meeting. I don't think there's a way to oppose a community center that doesn't make you sound like a villain from an 80s movie. So I'm just going to do it anyway. Please don't build a community center there. Please build housing. Like we have a historic housing shortage. And I said it already, but I just want to put a fine point on it. To not build housing it wouldn't just be wrong. Like it would be wrong, in my opinion, because we need housing. So yes, please, more housing in all of the lots as high as possible. That's my opinion as someone who lives right next to that. So thank you.
Thank you, David. Okay. Are there any final comments from CAC members before we shift to adjourn? Rom, I see your hand.
Yeah, this is quick. There was on Saturday, there was a planting of a Miyawaki forest just down from the high school. If you guys walk along Medford Street, it's just up from there. Take a look. It's just saplings right now, but it should grow into a forest at some point. That's if we come up with nothing else for the triangular piece next to the senior center, that would be a possibility. I'm thinking if you want to do that, plant another forest down there.
Thank you, Rom. And yeah, definitely encourage people to go see where the plantings are behind the high school. I'm gonna make sure that David's hand is up from before again, just in case there's a third comment.
Sorry, my bad.
Okay. You never know. Okay. With that, if nobody else has any comments, I think we can shift to adjournment. So I'll type up all of these notes and a meeting summary and send them out to CAC members.
City council members. There was not
Sorry.
one very strong positive.
Sorry, 1 second. I'm gonna mute John. Okay. Yeah, I'll send out a summary afterwards. And then if anyone has any questions, please feel welcome to follow up. Also, at the last meeting, we had discussed not waiting more than 3 months to meet again. So for now, we can leave it on standby to see if staff have updates for a November meeting. Otherwise, the latest that we will meet will be January of 2024. Yeah, so it's great to see you all. Oh, sorry, Rachel.
I just want to say, I think our standing meeting date would fall on both Thanksgiving and just before Christmas.
Thank you.
So the thought was, we want to just double check with you all. If we waited until January, generally, would that be okay? And assuming no like immediate updates that we can take quick action on, just knowing that the holidays, it gets a little. November and December are tricky scheduling no matter what. But if we have updates sooner, we certainly can try and fit in a meeting between the holidays if that works for folks. But we would need to find another date most likely anyway. Otherwise, our standing meeting would be January. Diana?
Yeah, I was actually wondering, I think that we started this whole CAC like in February 2022, I think, or something like that, January or something. So I'm wondering, what happens when the 2-year mark passes, which may be like February or something next year?
Yes. So we would expect that anticipate just a standing reappointment for folks. if folks are interested in continuing. We have had a few members who've dropped out. So we are expecting that we'll do some recruitment leading up to February to fill those seats. But also the reason for the 2 years is that we also know folks have life changes that they can only make a 2-year commitment. And that feels, we don't want to assume a forever plan. So I think we will anticipate a January date for sure. And we will, if something comes up where it makes sense for a meeting before that, we will certainly let you all know. But if unless anyone feels strongly that they definitely want to meet in the November, December between holidays time, please let us know. We can try and figure out a game plan for that.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you everyone for bearing with me while I type. And hope to see you in a couple months.